Present this to you. Now, Mr. Jackson has asked me to read a bit about an event that happened to him and a lot of other prisoners of war in Germany in World War II. I'll try and shorten it as best I can. It may be a bit long, so bear with me, please. As you know, Billy was shot down and taken prisoner. And towards the end of World War II, as the Russians were approaching the prisoner of war camp where he was being imprisoned, the Germans decided to move all those people further west into Germany. That forced march was not a whole lot unlike the march that those on Corregidor went through at the hands of the Japanese. So there's 2 pages here, so if you will bear with me, he's asked me to read it, and I will indulge that. So, Captain Leslie Kaplan, a flight surgeon for the 719th Bomber Squadron, published a story titled Death March Medic. Dr. Kaplan, now deceased, testified before the War Crimes Commission. We are proud to publish excerpts from his story, which is part of the history of the 449th Bomb Group. His story tells us of the deprivations and sufferings of some of our POWs and the brave actions of Dr. Kaplan and others to alleviate their pain. For you, the war is over, the first German officer I ever saw told me. That only a few minutes after I had bailed out of a B-24. We had been on a mission over Vienna and had been hard hit by flak on the way in. We managed to make it back to Yugoslavia where we had just bailed out. That's not a whole lot unlike one of the other members of our post, Leroy Grebe, who was in a B-24 that got shot down and he bailed out over Yugoslavia. Fortunately and unfortunately, he was taken prisoner of war, and but I don't want to give you this. But this story reminded me of Leroy Grebe's being shot down and bailed out over Yugoslavia. Like many of his countrymen, this Superman was wrong. For me, the toughest part of the war was just beginning. I was on the verge of a unique medical experience. Less than a half hour later, I was applying a splint to my co-pilot's broken leg, and my new job had begun. The next day, one of our gunners was brought into the jail where we were imprisoned. He had been bleeding from a nasty scalp wound ever since bailing out. I stopped the hemorrhage. My next patient was the bombardier who was carried into the jail with a groin injury. It was in this jail that I gave my first lecture, a lecture that I was to repeat dozens of times in the following months. The topic? It was the treacherous companion of mankind that has devastated armies, the dread carrier of typhus fever, the body louse. The routine of picking lice off our clothes became as common as washing our teeth. The Germans soon sent me to Luftkamp 4 in Pomerania, Poland. This will be remembered as a camp where Allied airmen were bayoneted en masse and bitten by police dogs. There were about 9,000 Air Force gunners there and a few hundred Royal Air Force enlisted men. True, it was a domain of heroes, but from the medical standpoint, it was a kingdom of illness. Heroism has its price. First, there were those who were wounded, burned, or maimed in aerial combat. Second were the numerous casualties ranging from irritability to outside insanity. Third were the routine illnesses to which any large body of people are subject, including large numbers of skin cases and diphtheria sufferers. 5 Allied doctors were on hand to handle this tremendous sick load. My job was to take care of the 2,400 men of Section C, sanitation, sick call, and hospitalization. The prison hospital, although fairly well supplied at times, was pitifully small. Only the sickest cases were admitted. Others were treated in the barracks area. Air gunners can do more than shoot. Many of the hospital wardmen were airmen who were trained on the spot. They made good medics. Our buddies in the RAF were good too. These fellows were intelligent, learned fast, and worked hard. They worked at our dispensary where they changed dressings many hours daily and treated minor ailments. Early in February, the Germans crowded 3,000 of our men into trains and shipped them out. This included most of our sick and wounded. On 6 February 45, the rest of the camp was marched out on a few hours' notice. I marched with Section C, which now numbered 2,600 men. I was worried and wondered if the men knew what was in store for them. We were on the road for 86 days, during which we marched, starved, froze, marched, scratched our lice, suffered disease, and marched some more. We lived in filth, slept in barns or fields, and dodged aerial strafings. We marched from the eastern front to the western front and then doubled back to the eastern front. We covered 500 miles. For food, we averaged 770 calories a day of German rations for the first 53 days of the march. If it had not been for the Red Cross food parcels we received occasionally, many more of us would have died. These parcels not only gave us an additional 600 calories a day, but they were our only appreciable source of protein. The last 30 days of the march, the Germans issued us more food and Red Cross parcels and were much more humane. They could hear Allied artillery in the distance and knew the day of judgment was nearing. The march was nightmarish. Our sanitation approached medieval standards. The inevitable result was disease, suffering, and death. We soon found out what it meant to live in filth on low rations and little water. Our first problem was handling the stragglers. Volunteers at the end of the column would spot a fellow who was weakening and support him. When a straggler could not keep up, a medic would stay behind to give him the protection of his Red Cross armband. In that way, the straggler was much less likely to be bullied by the guards. Sometimes it didn't work. Both medics and stragglers were gun-butted. The number of stragglers increased daily and it became impossible to support them all. The Germans allowed us to organize a slow party, which is made up of sick men who were permitted to proceed at their own pace. That helped some. In addition, they gave us a few farm wagons to carry the sick. Uncomfortable and cold as these wagons were, there was a long line of men waiting to get on them every morning. There was room for only the sickest. In the course of the march, we would pass Allied prison camps, which were too crowded to take us in, but we were usually able to leave our most serious cases. At first, the stragglers consisted of men with blisters, aching feet or joints, and tired muscles. These men suffered, but they didn't cause us much concern, for we expected them to toughen up. The medics made up a slogan: keep on marching and your blisters will turn into calluses and your aches into hard muscles. Most of them did, too. But all too soon, the straggling became more serious. Blisters became infected and many an ugly abscess developed and had to be opened. Mud and cold brought frostbite and in some cases gangrene and amputation. Men collapsed either from hunger, weakness, fear, or pain. The 5th day of the march, the first case of diphtheria was diagnosed. This soon was followed by a case of erysipelas. Any doctors in the house? I don't know what that is. Then cases of pneumonia began showing up, and on the latter part of the trip, tuberculosis was in evidence. There were several attacks of acute appendicitis. But the illnesses that plagued us most was dysentery, a natural consequence of living in filth and drinking unsafe water. Dysentery just overwhelmed us. It was of varying intensity. Some fellows were just annoyed while others were prostrated. Almost everyone had it. Day after dreary day as we marched along, the roads were lined with our dysenteric comrades relieving themselves. The sad spectacle of a soldier relieving himself right on a village street was so common that it excited no comment from German villagers. Taking care of all the sick was a heartbreaking job. We started out by organizing a hospital, and before long, many a farmer airman was working on our staff. The basic principle of treatment was bed rest. While others stood for hours in cold and rain to get a drink of boiled water or a few potatoes, the sick rested in the straw and whatever rations were available were brought to them. Whenever possible, they received extra portions. For medicines, the Germans gave us pittances of important drugs. We had some Red Cross medical parcels which gave us a small supply of bandage, tapes, aspirin, lice powder, and salves. For hot water bottles, we heated bricks. For dysentery cases, we made our own charcoal and let the patients chew it and swallow the powder. I had a small supply of sulfa pills which never left my person. These precious pills were doled out only to the most serious cases and those with pneumonia. Time will disclose the number of amputations and deaths. We left our worst sick behind to prison hospitals and never saw them again. At first, the medics did all the work at the barn hospitals. That was pretty tough on the medics, for they marched all day, often working during rest periods, and on rest days they walked extra miles to cover sick call for the scattered units of our column. This was improved when Airman Bob Merriam volunteered to do all the non-medical work around the hospital. He soon organized a group of helpers headed by Ray Stocker and Shorty Hunzinger. When shovels were available, they dug latrines. They prepared and distributed rations and boiled water. They operated a carrying service from sick wagon to hospitals for those patients with infected feet who could not stand and for those who were too weak to walk. Since many of these fellows also had dysentery, they had to be carried to and from the latrine all night. On several occasions when the Germans could not or would not get us horses to pull the sick wagon, these non-medics alternated teams of 12 men each to haul the wagon by manpower. On several occasions we received some unexpected help from our flying comrades. The last weeks of the war, Allied planes were frequently attacking the Jerries. Sometimes the strafing attacks would kill horses near us. That was manna from heaven. Willing gunners cut up these horses fast, and to our hungry columns, no meat ever tasted better than strafed horse. As Allied forces drew closer, German treatment became better. On May 2nd, 2 British sergeants in a recon car reached our column. At this beautiful sight, the Germans began throwing down their arms. One of the Brit soldiers addressed the Germans and us, "For you the war is over," he said. This time it was. So, tough times, tough men. And Billy Jackson was one of those.
Okay. Any special guests want to make any comments? Yeah.
Thank you all for your service.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, let me say something. Thank you. You talk about a small world. When I joined this deal, there's a fella, I don't know where his wit was then, but about what, wit, you've been there about 7, 8 years? Yeah. Always. Well, you know, when we got into service in San Antonio, there was I was on duty to help get the people off the buses and give them pencil and paper and let them write to do the test. Well, Whit was on a bus out of Brownsville, and when we got together, you know, we got he got in the same crowd we was in. But we was here at this post, looking at one another. I hadn't seen him since 43. And we recognized him. And that shows you that it's a small world. But another thing I want to say about, I was commander here at this post when a comrade died, Leonard Zager. Leonard lost a leg in the battle over there. The bulge, I believe. Well, at his funeral, we had the night the post honored him. And I got to thinking, what was I going to say? And it came to mind that the war was this. I guess it was about what 6, 7, 8 years ago when Mother died. But war was over in 45, and the war wasn't over for Leonard. Because every day when he got up, he had to put on artificial legs. And that's why, how many artificial legs we have today? You know, the war might be over, the fighting might be over, but the soldiers, the men that still got the war's still on. You still dream about it. you think about it. And I just want y'all to think about that. All these young boys, these young fellas, they got a long way to go. If we can help them, we sure need to help them. Thank you.
I think it's unbelievably remarkable that we've got the turnout that we have here today. It certainly shows the spirit of the people in this town that they have for their country and for the people who serve them. Now, Jay spoke a little bit about the spirit of the people during World War II. And you guys did great, but those people were absolutely phenomenal. Everybody participated. I mean everybody. And we had gas rationing, we rationed food, we collected scrap. If you had a job, it had to be associated with the military. Even the schools participated. I had a chemistry teacher who was German. He probably wasn't too far away from there because he still had a great accent. But every morning in our chemistry class, he took the first 15 minutes and he told us what was going on in the world and in the war. It kind of got us in the frame of mind that we ought to be proud to serve our country, and a lot of the people that, or a lot of the boys that I was in class with either left the class early and joined up, or they went into the service as soon as they got out. But the remarkable part of that war effort was the total participation of everybody, and they were very welcome to welcome you back. They were very helpful in helping you get back into your new life after you got out. But I want to thank you again for participating. It certainly shows your patriotism.
Anyone else? I'll just echo, excuse me.
This book was designed and printed for one of my granddaughters. And as a charter member of this post, our family would like to donate it to the post here and put it on display somewhere. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? I guess I just want to echo these comments here of, gosh, this is a crowd. Thanks for coming, supporting these guys, and we just want to thank you again for being here. I have one more person that helped put all this together. Susan Meyer, are you here?
No.
Charles, she didn't make it. Anyway, Susan Meyer helped Charles and I put this together, sent out letters to invitation, and printed a lot of things for us. So anyway, she had a big hand in putting this program together. Okay, but ain't no one else in that. Oh yeah, okay.
I talk too much. But I don't know of a single man that served in World War II that wouldn't do it again. Need be. And we have a lot of people in the service today the same way. They made a career of it. It's a lot different life. But they're there.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, well, that concludes our program here, and again, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Yeah, well, they did. Ronnie brought it. That was good. Yeah. I'm glad you got it.
Yeah, it's too long. Thank you, sir. Good job. Thank you. Well, I got